Hi, welcome. Today we talk about Star Citizen and money. I'm already regretting this. The topic is huge and can be approached in many ways. For example, we can talk about the funding of the project, starting in 2012 with the Kickstarter campaign, or the current funding, the cost of the ships, the Voyager Direct store that failed big time, the merchandise, how much you should pay to enjoy the game, the pay to win or the scam accusations, the refundians, direct smart, the grey market, the great chimera of LTI, melting, CCU, buyback tokens, TOS, disclaimers, whales and concierge, and so much more. Too many topics for a single video, so today I will focus on the funding, showing you where to find more information about how the pledges are used, and a bunch of game-related topics, spanning from pay to win to the changes to the pledge ships caused by the development, and the impact on the player base, and finally a final note about refunds. As I did last time in the 10 years of Star Citizen video, I will discuss some of these topics from my perspective. Please refer to the aforementioned video for more details about this. Exactly as last time, and as I mentioned, I cannot nor want to cover everything, as the resulting video will be several hours long. However, I'm happy to discuss other topics not covered so far, and I'm always open to suggestions. Alright, let's start with the campaign, then we move to the current funding process. The Kickstarter campaign, as mentioned in the previous video, started in 2012. The funding later continued via the main website, and look how cute it was 10 years ago. Through the years, the bulk of the money came from players, initially slowly, and it then ramped up drastically as the project gained momentum and popularity. However, we, the backers, are not the only one funding the game. For example, in 2020, the project received circa $17 million from existing investors. Also, on Cloud Imperium Games' website, we can see the financial reports for the previous years, that you can see the income from different sources and the costs, such as the salaries or other development costs, the headcount, and the details of where they work, whether they are located in the United States, for example, or the rest of the world. It is important to note that these numbers are freely available to everyone, which is fundamental and provide a lot of transparency. The 2021 figures were posted on the 30th of December 2022, so I guess we will see the figures for 2022 at the end of this year. Another tool to monitor the funding, this time made and maintained by the community, is the crowdfunding development spreadsheet. The amount of information is stunning, so hats off to the admins. As usual, you can find a link to this tool in the description. One aspect it is clearly highlighted, which is crucial, but sometimes ignored or forgotten, is that the $500 million raised so far did not arrive at day one. Instead, we see a non-linear progression, something that had consequences on the planning and organization of the project. Another point to note is that usually the budget looks like the mirror, pretty much, of Star Citizen funding. You have a budget, and as the project progresses, the pool goes down. Here it's going up. So we now kind of know where the money is coming from, and we have an idea of the expenses. This is important and tackles at least some of the scam accusation, like Chris Roberts running away with the treasure, as we can have an idea of what kind of expenses there are, the headcount, which is apparently higher than the 700 I mentioned in my previous video, and so on. The crowdfunding spreadsheet really puts things into perspective, as it highlights even more how difficult planning ahead can be with all the uncertainties deriving from such a funding methodology. There are many aspects of the game considered controversial. The biggest is the main funding tool of the project, ergo the sales of Virtual Pixel for all ranges and prices, our beloved ships. There are many paths we can take to discuss this, and uncountable opinions. For example, point 1, the cost of ships and packages. Point 2, the pay-to-win accusations. Point 3, the pay-to-play factor, or better phrase, the pay-to-enjoy. Point 4, the changes to ships that can make people regret spending their money. Point 5, similarly to the previous, the delays or changes schedule-wise. And looking at you, BMM sitting in my hangar since November 2013. There are many more points, but let's start with this. Point number 1, the cost of the ships. This is the favorite of haters and cheap gaming websites, as they love headlines saying how expensive Star Citizen is. However, the concept of expensive, cheap and fair price are actually applicable to basically everything. People will always complain about the cost of a car, a game, cost of a phone, the cost of a particular suit or a dress. What they all miss though is that what is expensive to them may be cheap for someone else. The definition of cheap and expensive is not objective, and is tightly related to the value we, the potential buyers, give to such an object. This is also influenced by infinite other factors, such as disposable income or spare time, how much we enjoy the game, how hyped we are, how responsible we are money-wise, and so on. So are 40 quid too much for the game? What about 200 or 3000? To put it bluntly, if I gain €500,000 post taxes, I probably don't care about spending 200 euros on a good I will enjoy. If I gain 10,000 per annum, then my priorities are different. The amount of spare time is another driving factor. So my father used to say, well, the bread has no teeth. Ergo, once you grow up and have disposable income, you probably don't have time between jobs, family, kids, and all the responsibilities we have. For example, when I was a teenager, I used to spend almost every evening playing video games. Nowadays, my spare time is so fragmented that I cannot commit to any game. I write scripts and books in the middle of the night, and I record videos in my lunch break, like today. Grinding is hardly an option for me, and this is precisely where premiums of different nature come handy, so to speak, in many free-to-play grind-based games. However, Star Citizen things work a bit differently. There's no really grinding per se, there is no linear progression or ultimate endgame ship everyone wants. On the contrary, the grind is focused on moving from basic ships to medium ships. The further step, larger and capital ships, is not really the end goal, at least not for a single individual. This is where the scale of the game comes in, and the gameplay shifts toward organizations and greater operations. So, quick example, let's say I like mining. If I'm on my own, I can start with end mining. The ROC is very cheap to rent, so it's probably a good investment, but the prospector may be even more interesting. The next step in this sort of progression is the mole, but is it really worth it as a single player? And what about the gigantic Orion? That's definitely off the table. Remember this team as it will appear again later. Point 2. Pay to win. In Star Citizen, bigger is not often better. Let's put it this way, you buy a heavy fighter for $250, such as the Scorpion, or a Vanguard, or others. I buy an Hammerhead for $700. Shall we do a 1 versus 1? So big chips cost more to operate, especially as more mechanics are implemented, require more players to be fully efficient, and work as a force multiplier in optimal conditions, as they provide maybe an hangar, a respawn point, supplies and so on top of heavier weapons and ordnance. A solo player in an Hammerhead is a burden. Big ships, as mentioned, tend to cost more and require more hands, at the moment possibly humans, to properly work. Of course, there are exceptions. Too many aspects of the game are still work in progress, and there are categories of ships they may not follow the rule. Also, the earlier this ship is announced, the cheaper it is. A Banu Merchantman in 2013 was about $300, now is basically twice that. The following is a series of ships, having something in common, and their costs. As you can see, the price tag does not directly correlate to the size, and definitely does not mean that a particular ship is better than the others. In parentheses, you can find the very first price, usually when they were only concepts. The first is a round of fighters and multi-crew ships smaller than corvettes. I just selected a bunch of them. Of course there are more. I try to minimize the non-released ships. What we can see immediately is that a Connie costs as much as a Scorpius, and a lot less than an Eclipse. Both are fundamentally useless ships outside combat. The Katas Black is instead an Evergreen. Packs a nice punch, is multi-crew, can carry a rock, a decent amount of cargo for its size, and is much cheaper than most heavy fighters. What about haulers or industrial ships and vehicles? Again, we see quite a disparity between function, size and price. Sometimes this is related to the features still being implemented. For example, at the moment of recording, there aren't many reasons to get a mole over 2 prospectors, but patch 319 should add more features to mark the greater difference between these two ships. Big ships are unique. In premise, note how many of them have not been released yet, and how many have seen a huge spike cost-wise. If you have pledged these ships in the past, these bring a direct benefit of making CCU upgrades much cheaper. Looking at these 3 lists, I am even less convinced that more expensive means better. On the contrary, sometimes the advantages are not entirely justified, at least at the moment. I've already mentioned the mole, for example. In other cases, the price is increased to justify the uniqueness of a particular model, or the fact that such a ship is very specialized, see the Eclipse or the A2 Starlifter. The A2, for example, costs almost twice as the base model, the C2, but the price for its unique features is not irrelevant. I'm personally not convinced that using cost is the best way to approach the issue of rarity and uniqueness, but I can't really imagine a solid alternative either. Before moving forward, there is another perspective we can use to examine this topic. Shall we do some silly math using the example mentioned above? So the Scorpion versus the Hammerhead. Your fighter costs $250, my Hammerhead $700. I have 5 friends joining me on the Hammerhead. They have spent $60 on average each, which is more than the base package. Our total cost is therefore $1,000. However, if we divide the total cost for the 6 players in my Hammerhead, we have spent on average $166 per capita, which is 66% of the cost of a fighter. So my crew is now enjoying a great multiplayer experience for 4 times less the money you have spent. So the point of this reasoning, Nothing in particular, but I thought it was cool. But I think it's an additional proof of the fact that there is always more than one way to look at something. In this case, that you don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy larger capital ships. It can be bought in-game thanks to the effort of multiple players, or you just need one player that owns one, and everyone else just needs access to the universe. In fact, as we know, having friends is good. If you don't have any, join an org. Being alone is cool, but up to a certain point. Next, point 3, pay to play or pay to enjoy. This is a common question as many potential players see the big numbers in the ship store and are, understandably, perplexed. To play, a game package is required. Nowadays, Star Citizen and Squadron 42 are separated purchases, but until a few years ago they were included in a single package and the package itself was much cheaper. Nowadays, the package with Star Citizen is about €50 post VAT, but there are periods where they are discounted. The basic pledge gives you access to the universe and includes a starter ship, such as the Aurora or the Mustang. However, the functionality of these ships is limited, and up a notch we find the C8X species or the Cutter, then again the Avenger or the Nomad and so on. However, now the cost is basically doubled. This can lead to complaints about grinding, and the fact that wipes are necessary now and then as the development progresses can make some players feel almost forced to spend more real money than they are comfortable doing. For example, after a wipe, starting with a Prospector or a ship capable of carrying a RC definitely improves the speed of grinding Alpha UEC if mining is your thing. A player who has pledged the Aurora yes instead will have to rely on end mining. This is a fair point, but it's not unique to Star Citizen and is quite common actually. It is present in almost every free-to-play game. In War Thunder, for example, if you want to skip the grind and start, for example, with Cold War tanks, you need to buy a package. Quite expensive one, all things considered. As the development will come to a conclusion, wipes shouldn't happen anymore, and this issue should disappear. Point 4 and 5, players complaining about changes to their ships, or changes in the development process and scheduling, leading to delays, or ships performing differently compared to the original pledge. This raises a question. So Star Citizen is a work-in-progress game, right? Ships still have HP pools, and armor, shields, components are barely interconnected. There are fundamentally no engineering features so far, and even the classification of components and weapons have changed in the past, and probably will change again. So, did you consider the possibility that the ship you're buying would have to adapt to such changes? Or you thought that your ship, without many of the features that have not been implemented yet, would have stayed exactly the same throughout the development, with MFDs barely working, semi-useless copilot seat, no in-ship features, no engineering, and so on? When you check the disclaimers and TOS, we can read the message saying, Open Alpha access isn't for everyone, because the game is still work in progress, there are bugs and changes to the design. In addition, in-game items, content, features may take longer to realize than originally estimated. This is why we have a 14-day refund policy, and the refund period is actually 30 days per CIG policy. So, do you see where I'm going? Okay, time for another silly example. Imagine buying a sort of extended season ticket for your favorite football team that lasts 5 years. If after the second year, due to changes in the team composition or coach, the performance decreases, what do? In real life you can't really do much about it, but Star Citizen of course is better than life, and you can melt your ship, thus exchange it for stock credits, or use it as a base for a CCU game, as I mentioned before. CCU is the acronym for Cross-Chassis Upgrade. In simple words, you can always spend more in Star Citizen, obviously. So what you can do is a sort of Delta upgrade, thus buying a token serving the purpose of transforming your old ship into a new one. And fun fact, this chain of upgrades sometimes saves you a considerable amount of money. On the contrary, if you are done spending money, you can melt your ship for a cheaper one to play, and the spare can be left there for perhaps a future buyback, or to get skins or other items. With a football season ticket instead, you can't upgrade it to watch the matches of another team. Also it would be awkward, but you can still sell it in the grey market if it's not nominal. So besides the tongue-in-cheek tone of the last part, the point is that you should not overfixate yourself over a specific ship. For example, the original Constellation should have been my definitive ship. I don't care about fighters, I play DCS either as a rotary wing pilot or a Rio, Wizo or Nav. Therefore the original Constellation was perfect, as it should have had a C2 station, and C2 stands for Command and Control. However, things have changed, and unfortunately the C2 station is gone. That is why I'm now interested in the Polaris. which should not be too huge to fly with a bunch of friends, whilst also being flexible and close to my expectations. I'm not excited about the torpedoes though, so if something closer to what I want is released, I will simply melt the Polaris and get the new ship. Again, if tomorrow's plans change again, then I will melt or CCU my ship to get what I think I want, while saving on the total cost, hopefully. I am free to do whatever I want with the money I spent. So, to recap, consider the pledge as a means to support and get the game, plus something you would like to use in the game itself. The thing may not be the same ship. Do not be afraid of melting and upgrading to find what suits best your expectations. Star Citizen is a great and ambitious project, but as everything new, and with a lot of visibility, it has attracted plenty of haters. Some are driven by ignorance, some are actually understandable. I have mentioned, for example, all 2012 and 2013 backers that have seen the project they pledge changing so drastically. Quick Google query returns interesting events. For example, this is a 2018 lawsuit of a backer against Cloud Imperium Games, featured on Ars Technica. And I feel sorry for this guy, and his reasoning is quite solid. In a comment instead, another player managed to have his $1,000 pledge refunded by discussing it with the customer service. On the other side of the spectrum, there are groups such as the subreddit Star Citizen Refunds that probably started with the intent of helping with, well, what the subreddit title says, but then shifted towards trolling. I personally don't understand it, because if you don't care about something, why would you spend time doing this rather than something else? But hey, this is the internet. Everyone is free to do whatever they want. Back to Star Citizen, as mentioned, the refund period is 30 days, although some disclaimers still mention 14 days. So if you're not sure about your pledge, you have buyer's remorse, the status of a particular patch is particularly awful and you can't play, do go ahead and ask for a refund. It is better to come back later or move to another game than be annoyed for something as silly as a video game. So, as I said in the beginning, there are too many angles, topics and perspectives to consider, but that's about it for today, as fitting everything in a single video is impossible. If you have suggestions about something I should cover going forward, feel free to drop a line in the comments below. Thanks for watching and take care.